There are moments in history that are game changers. I think right now we are living in a game-changing moment with the rise of AI. Artificial intelligence used to be the stuff of science fiction, right? The idea of computers learning and robots talking and communicating and thinking for themselves was really far-fetched, right? It used to be that robots were just silly sidekicks, R2-D2 and C-3PO. Or maybe they were the villain, like the Terminator. Different versions, sure, but it was all sci-fi imagination. But now, that's not exactly as far-fetched anymore, is it? How many of you, show of hands, how many of you have used AI this week? Okay, a lot of us have, absolutely. And some of you are like, if I admit it, is he going to tell my teacher? No, I'm not, I promise. Most of us have. Maybe it was to write something. Maybe it was to help generate some ideas. Maybe it was just to make your life a little bit easier. And for some of us, we've interacted with AI this week without even having realized it. It's like built in and baked into so many of our apps and programs, and it just feels like it's kind of everywhere. And really, in the past few years, I mean, it has just gotten built into everything. A lot of times, it can be super helpful. But sometimes computers backfire a little bit, right? It's the difference between my autocorrect on my text saying I'm on my way versus I'm on my waffles. Because that makes sense. Thank you, AI, for correcting my typing. It's not the end of the world when that happens, but it's definitely not helpful. Whether you like it or not, I think it's here to stay. It is a game-changing moment. And most of us are pretty okay with that. I think when history looks back, a lot of it is going to look at your generation and go, you guys were the last generation to remember what life was like before AI, because the students coming up after you, that's all they know, and it's always been part of their world. And history has always had game-changing moments. If you go back to the 80s and 90s, the game-changing moment was internet. Like, you guys don't know a world without internet. I kind of remember that. You go back 100 years, and it was the telephone, right? What would take sometimes weeks and even months to communicate with someone in New York to California, with the invention of the phone, suddenly just took seconds. The interesting thing about these game changers is before they happen, they were kind of impossible to predict. They just kind of appear on the scene. And when they do, when they arrive, in no time, they change everything. And we can barely imagine what life was like without them. But as big as inventions like the telephone and AI are, there's a game-changing moment that I want to talk about tonight that I think is bigger than all of it. It's bigger than everything. And this moment, you probably know where I'm going with this, happened a little over 2,000 years ago in a tiny town called Bethlehem, just about 10 miles outside of Jerusalem. A little place, not very popular, not very important. And yet it was there that we find the moment that God decided to enter into this world and become one of us. So as we get that set up for the night, we're going to be in John 1. If you've got your Bibles, go ahead and turn there. John chapter 1. You can follow on your notes on the screen. We'll be kind of sitting in there for most of the night. So this moment where God becomes one of us. Now, I need to be clear. Like, we're not just talking about, like, some God out there or this rumor of, like, there might be a God. And it's definitely not a copy of God. And it's not an AI robot God or a Google summary of God. But the moment God entered into, put on flesh, became creation, the fullness, the infiniteness, the completeness of God became a person. And we might go, okay, but why does that matter for us? Like, we know it's Christmas time. We know we talk about things like this around this time of year. But why does that matter? And I would argue that it matters because for God to step into our world means that we don't have to wonder what the God of the universe is like. We don't have to wonder what he's about, what he thinks, what he does, what he commands, what he expects. All we've got to do is look at Jesus. And Jesus lived 2,000 years. We don't have pictures of him. We don't have videos of him. But we do have the accounts of the people who knew him. Followers of Jesus, friends of Jesus. People who investigated and learned the stories of Jesus and recorded it spent years of their lives so that we could know who Jesus was. And of course, before Jesus, people had gotten glimpses of God. It wasn't that God was completely absent or completely silent. He revealed himself in the power of creation. He revealed himself in the faithfulness to his people. He showed up in miracles. And based on how God had revealed himself prior, some people had kind of thought they had God figured out. But when Jesus showed up, and we talked about this last time we gathered, he didn't necessarily look like the Messiah, the rescuer, the one that they were all expecting. But he was exactly what they and exactly what we needed. As we talk about this tonight, there's a really important theological word that you need to know, and you might know it already, but in case you don't, it's the theological word that means God showed up, and that word is incarnation. Incarnation means that Jesus, who is fully God, took on a human body, and he lived a fully human life. And for those of you who have grown up in church, you're like, yeah, I know that. Like, that's old news. Like, that's not a big deal. But we need to try to wrap our minds around this just a little bit, and how extraordinary this is, that God came down and became one of us. This idea is so big that we can't afford to get it wrong. So I want to spend a little bit of time, like I said, in the Gospel of John tonight. And John is written by one of Jesus' closest followers and friends. In the very first chapter of the Gospel of John, we get one of the clearest descriptions about who Jesus is and why he came. And remember, this is important because last time we met, like we said, people had a different expectation, incorrect assumptions about who the promised Messiah would be. And when Jesus shows up, many people looked at him and said, I don't think I want that kind of Messiah. Even though it was exactly what God said we needed. So who was Jesus really? What was he like? Here's what John tells us in John chapter 1, starting in verse 1. He writes, "In the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. This light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it." John will continue. He tells us a little bit about John the Baptist, but we're going to pick up again in verse 10. So jump down just a couple verses. Tells us that he, the Word, came into the very world he created, but the world didn't recognize him. This is what we talked about last time. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. But to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn, not with a physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God. Verse 14, "So the Word became human," or the Word became flesh, "and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son." Some of your translations might put some different words in there, but this is the idea we get, that the Word became flesh, full of grace and truth, love and faithfulness, and he became one of us. Now, let's make some observations here. Notice John refers to Jesus as the Word, and the word used, the word in the Greek here is the word logos. And if I were to try to boil this down into just simple terms of like how do we wrap our mind around what John is trying to communicate about Jesus, this word logos basically means he's describing Jesus as the fundamental law of the universe. Like he is the one who holds this whole thing together. That's how we see John use this term in verses 2 through 4. This word, this logos that John describes, holds together, sustains. Through him, everything is created, and he holds it, maintains it, sustains it. Right? So he is He's describing this word, this person described as the word, as this being of immense power. Then in verse 5, we see John describes, and he says that the word brings light. The word brings light. Now think about that for a second. Like, what do words do? Words communicate. Words reveal things, right? When we speak, our words reveal the ideas that are inside of us. They make our thoughts accessible to people, and that's what the word comes to do here in John. That's what Jesus does. He reveals God, and he makes God accessible. And it's really interesting because, when we look at the Gospels, we tend to understand them as this is the life, this is the story about Jesus. And at Christmas time, we gravitate toward Gospels like Matthew, where we get Jesus' birth story from the perspective of Joseph, or we go to the story in Luke and we get Mary's kind of side of Jesus' birth story. But John doesn't start with Jesus' birth, because Jesus didn't start in a manger. John said that Jesus, the Word, was actually already there in the beginning. Before galaxies spun, before time was even a thing, before history began, before anything was, Jesus existed. Jesus didn't suddenly exist the moment he was born. This is big. This is theological. This is important. This is foundational to our Christian beliefs. And John doesn't stop there. He says that in this time before the beginning, Jesus was both with God and Jesus was God, right? So he's eternal and he's divine, and through him, everything was created. Your breath created. Your DNA created. The stars, when you look up at night, yes, he created those too. All of it is created through him. Think about that for a second. The Jesus described in John 1, who is there and is the creator, he creates breath. And then he comes as a baby and is born and breathes the air he created. Just think about that for a second. That blows my mind. In verse 14, right, we jump down. John drops this statement that almost feels impossible. It's huge. The Word became human. The Word became flesh. This all-powerful, eternal, divine being who existed before beginning even was a thing becomes human. He got a body. He got hungry. He got tired. He took naps. He had friends. I'm sure if Ultimate Frisbee was a thing, he would have played it. He laughed until his sides hurt. He cried when his heart broke. He knew what it was like to be betrayed. He experienced the highs and lows of the human experience. The creator of all things became one of us. And immediately after this statement, John gives the reason. He became one of us because he was full of grace and truth. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness. If you want to look at the reason Jesus came, it's all over John's gospel. Most famous verse ever, John 3:16, because God so loved the world that he sent his only son. Motivated by love and faithfulness. Right? I mean, what other reason would motivate the God of the universe to step down from his throne in glory and willingly become one of us, right? Because we know that the human life isn't just an Instagram highlight reel. The human life is not just the pretty pictures that we post. The human life is full of a lot of hurt and pain and suffering. So it's not all birthday parties, campfire stories, and time with friends. Jesus would have come and as a human walked through the messy and the less than awesome parts of being human. He knew what it was like to be sad. He knew what it was like to be hungry, to be thirsty. He had to deal with the awkwardness of being a teenager, right? His voice cracked. He got pimples. I bet you he even had tension with his parents. And if you don't believe me, check out Luke 2:41 through 52, when his parents left him at the temple and then said, "What were you doing?" Jesus knows what it's like to live your life and mine. But God is full of unfailing love and faithfulness. That is, as the Old Testament would describe it, a loving kindness, a love that doesn't give up, a love that shows its covenant faith. Like you can't break it, it's covenant. God has established it. It's this love that shows up when you don't deserve it and when you need it the most. So what does John 1 teach us about Jesus? There are truths here in John 1 that are so important, so foundational to what we believe as Christians. We can't just skip past them. So let's highlight a few of these one at a time, because these truths impact our understanding of who Jesus is, the central figure of our faith and what we believe to be true about him. And not only that, but as we understand him, we will understand ourselves and we will understand how we live. So first thing I want to point out and look at is that Jesus has always been God. John doesn't start verse 1 easily. John drops it's a massive mic drop moment. He opens with this bombshell. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was God. He was with God already in the beginning. What does that tell us? It tells us that Jesus didn't become God somewhere along the way. And some of you might be like, well, yeah, duh. Like, isn't that just what we believe about Jesus? But that's not what everyone believes about Jesus. There are people who would call themselves or try to identify as Christian who do not believe Jesus was God. They believe that maybe Jesus became God. He did enough, he leveled up, so to speak, that God was like, boom, divine status to you. Or that he somehow earned it, or he became like God. That is not what the Bible teaches us. Jesus did not become God somewhere along the way. Jesus always was. He has eternally been God, even before there was a before. So think about that, right? Before Newton explains gravity, before Einstein develops and maps out relativity, before your science teacher ever made you study the periodic table of elements, Jesus is the eternal God who created atoms and brought them into being. He authored the laws of the universe. Before the very first human heartbeat, he is the one who sets hearts into motion. And before any of us ever popped up on the scene, and before any human ever wondered, why am I here? What is my purpose? And what is the meaning of this thing we call life? Jesus was already the answer. So why does that matter? Because if Jesus has always been God, then he's not an add-on. He's not just another good teacher that you can take or leave. He is God himself. He is the Logos. He is the fundamental law of the universe, the divine being who holds all things together. He is the created order. Jesus is all-powerful. He is all-knowing. He is greater than you and I can even think or imagine. And this means the only logical conclusion is that he is worthy of our worship. And here's what makes this even more amazing then, right? Because we can talk about this God who is eternal and all-powerful and all this and all that. But what's more amazing is this God doesn't stay distant. He doesn't stay out there somewhere in the cosmos. He chooses to enter into our world. He chooses to enter into our sin, our mess, and he chooses to draw close to us. And that brings us to our second truth, that Jesus became one of us. Right? John 1:14 tells us the Word became human, flesh and bone and blood, and made his home among us. Right? Think about that, where we've been already in our talk. The God who thought up galaxies got acne. the one who designed the human brain, understood what it was like to be mentally exhausted and want to take a nap. The God who designed meteor showers and sunsets moved into the neighborhood, into the mess of human life. And not just the highlight reels of human life, but the real, the messy, the complicated, the painful stuff. Jesus understood what it was like to be misunderstood by his family. Numerous times in the gospel, they don't understand what he's doing or why he's doing it. He knew the pain of losing friends. He knew betrayal. He knew what it was meant to be exhausted, to be pulled in every direction, to have people expect things of you who wanted, people wanted things from him. Right? And when we recognize who Jesus is, we go, yeah, okay, man, have you ever felt misunderstood? Have you ever had friends just abandon you and ghost you? Have you ever been so drained that all you want to do is like kind of escape from people for a while and go crash? Like, the stories of Jesus in the gospel tells us that he experienced that too. But why would he do it? Right? Like, that's not the fun stuff. That's the messy stuff. That's the exhausting stuff. So why would he do it? One answer. Because love doesn't watch from the sidelines. Think about it. What's more convincing? Someone saying, hey, I love you and I care about you, or someone actually showing up to care about you with you? Here's the beauty of the incarnation, that God became flesh. God didn't just send a message. He didn't just send a text. He didn't send a prophet like the Old Testament. He showed up in the flesh. He sent himself. And because God showed up, when we have these moments where we cry out in heartbreak and when we cry out in frustration, God doesn't just go, yeah, I can imagine how that would feel. He goes, I know. I know because I've been there. And here's what's important. This is going to bring us into our third point. God didn't just show up to us so that he could relate to us. I think sometimes we stop there. And by stopping there, we miss some really important stuff. Is Jesus your friend? Yes, absolutely. He even says so. But Jesus didn't just come so he could be your friend. Jesus didn't just come so that he could be a positive influence in your life. Jesus came to be our rescuer. Point number 3, Jesus brings light into our darkness. Right? John doesn't just tell us that Jesus became a human. He actually tells us why Jesus becomes a human. Look at verse 4 again. It says, the Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness shall not overcome it. Right? In order to understand what an important metaphor John is communicating to us here, that this idea that Jesus brought life to everyone because he's light, right? Think about how darkness works. Darkness is dark. It's disorienting. Even when it's dark in a place you're familiar with, like your own home, it's not going to stop you from stubbing your toe or bumping into the coffee table or stepping on a Lego. But you know when you're wandering in the darkness and you catch just that little light of like the clock on the oven or like the nightlight in the bathroom, and suddenly you're like, okay, I can like orient myself now. I can figure out where I am in relation to this or that. And that's all well and good, but you know what's even better? Is flipping on a light switch. Right? And that's basically what Jesus did. When he became one of us, it says that the light entered into the darkness. He flipped on a light in a room that had been completely dark and had no windows. Because before Jesus, yes, we did have God reveal himself, but humanity is trying to figure out the answers. Like, who is God and what does he expect and how can we know him? Who am I? What is my purpose? What's my relation to this God? And there had been glimpses of God through creation and the law and the prophets and all of our Old Testament history. But there were still so many unanswered questions. And so when Jesus shows up, he is God in the flesh. If you want to know what God is like, look at Jesus. If you want to see God's heart up close, turn to Jesus. and people could finally see who God was and what he was like. He's not a distant, impersonal deity. He is not a cosmic killjoy out to ruin your fun. He's a caring creator, and he loves us enough to join us in our life, to join us in our broken world. He was not sin. He had no sin, right? So he joins us. We are sinful, but he is not. He joins us. He enters in, and he rescues us, right? So when life is overwhelming, when we have made too many poor choices to count, when you're stumbling in the dark and you want an exit, Jesus is the light, and Jesus is the rescue. So what does all this mean for us? How do we live in light of these truths? I've got just two applications for us before we go to small groups tonight. Two challenges as we reflect on who Jesus is and as we remember and celebrate this Christmas season. The first challenge is to remember who Jesus really is. I'll be the first to admit, it is easy in the Christmas season to kind of let Jesus become small in our minds. And what I mean by that is, if you've been in church, you hear the Christmas story every year, and sometimes it loses some of the extraordinary. Sometimes it loses some of the astonishing because it just feels like, oh yeah, I've heard it before. Add to that the idea that whenever we see Jesus at Christmas time, he's a baby. He's in a manger, and babies are powerless, and babies poop their diapers, and babies cry, and they just want to eat, and they're just kind of frustrating. If I'm being they're cute, maybe, I don't know, but kind of frustrating. And all you do is see Jesus as a baby, and you're like, yeah, but we need to remember, the baby's more than a baby. The baby in the manger is the same God who spoke galaxies into existence. And it might sound a little bit silly, but maybe I want to encourage you and challenge you with this idea, is that every time this Christmas season where Jesus pops up, and whether that's a Christmas movie or a decoration or the manger scene, anywhere where you see the baby Jesus, you remind yourself that the tiny baby is a big God. The tiny baby is a big God. I don't ever want us to forget the fact that the all-powerful God of the universe chose to become one of us. And he did that, and he entered in as a baby, but he didn't stay a baby. Look at the end of Luke chapter 2. Jesus grew in wisdom. He got smarter, and stature. He got bigger. The tiny baby is a big God. Don't forget it. And the second thing I want to challenge us with this week is to make sure that we share the light of Jesus with someone else. Because one of the other traps we can fall into is we can go, that sounds like good news for me, and it stays there. But Jesus didn't just come to rescue you and you alone. He came to be light for everyone. And one of the best ways to just recognize how amazing that gift truly is to share it with someone else. The two best ways that we can do this are to share the gospel, and that does mean out loud with words, and to show up and love people deeply and care for them in how we speak and how we act. Because like we said earlier, love doesn't sit on the sidelines. So this week, look for people in your life who need the light of Jesus. Look for ways to love them and opportunities to speak the good news of the gospel to them. Because you can share the good news, but good news sounds like even better news when it's joined with love and care. And isn't that just what Jesus did? Right? Jesus didn't just come and proclaim God's good news. He modeled it. He lived it. He healed. He cared. He loved. And when you do the same for others, you're reflecting that same kind of heart that caused God to step in as a human in the middle of the mess and engage here with us in the world in the first place. So those are my two challenges. Remember who Jesus really is, and share the light of Jesus with someone else. In a minute here, we're going to dismiss to small groups. Small groups are a chance where we get to just continue to talk about this theme. What stands out to us from the text, from this story today? How do we go and apply what we've learned? How do we challenge, encourage, and pray for one another? That's the goal of our group time. So as we get ready to go to groups, would you guys pray with me as we close? Let's thank God for stepping into the chaos of our world and bringing light to the darkness. God, we are grateful for Jesus. Thank you for the gift of your Son. God, help us to never lose sight of who Jesus is. He is the eternal, divine creator, all-powerful sustainer of all things. And God, your word says that you loved us enough that you sent him in the form of a baby to grow up to be a man who would die and rescue us from our sin. Father, thank you. We cannot thank you enough for Jesus because we could not save ourselves. So God, would you help us? Would you help us to be mindful? God, would you help us to be aware of where we've just kind of forgotten or disregarded the Christmas message, the goodness of the gift of Christ, and the goodness of how you love us and provide for us. And Father, would you help us to see the light for who he truly is? God, we are sinful people. We stumble around in the darkness of life thinking that we can do enough good or earn enough, God, and we can't. But Jesus can. So God, help us to recognize he is the Savior we need. And then the only logical response is to worship. So God, would you help us do that in both word and deed? Be with us as we go to groups next. In Jesus' name, amen.